Welcome to Language, the Mindful Utilization of Patterns. This is part 1 of 3 parts looking at how we can engage in 2 ways of thinking about, detecting and utilizing the patterns in language to help facilitate effective change in ourselves and in others. We have 2 perspectives from which we can look at language in the behavioral technology, NeuroLinguistic Programming. The first is the meta model, and the second is the Milton model. The meta model is about recovering missing information, called deletions, broad generalizations, distortions, for example, where unuseful connections are made between events happening and what people may choose to believe about those events. The linguistic presuppositions underlying language. And there's more. But first, the Milton model is about utilizing missing parts of language to allow people to wonder about what might be there that's not spoken about, but is hinted at or indicated in some way or another. Generalizations, distortions, and by now you can see the pattern, presuppositions. And looking a bit more at the meta model, it's about finding patterns and connections in language. When we're working with ourselves or with someone else, we're listening to the language to examine the deletions, generalizations and distortions to answer questions like, how is this person creating their model of the world? Let's have a look at an example. Suppose somebody says, when I get this job, I'll be happy. Even this one simple sentence has quite a lot in it. First, there's the presupposition that they'll get the job. They're actually suggesting that they will get the job. The things that will occur in our mind are questions like this, or observations like this, that there is this expectation that the job will still be there in a certain amount of time. This would seem to indicate that they have a belief that they are capable of the job, and also they have the belief or perception that others believe they are capable and worthy of the job. And of course, we don't even know what the job is. So we begin to wonder things like this. What skills and knowledge are required? Does the person actually have the skills, or are they confident of their ability to be able to learn the skills quickly enough to get by in the job? And something that's not indicated on the surface, but maybe one of the bits of information we want to recover, is how does this job fit with their values and how they identify themselves? There's one other singularly important aspect of this. There's an important cause-effect. That's in the structure of the sentence. When I get this job, I'll be happy. That's suggesting that the gaining of the job will cause a state of happiness. But we might ask questions in our own mind, and there may be questions we'll ask the person eventually, but there'll certainly be things that the NLP practitioner thinks about. How is it that getting the job will result in the person being happy? What are the person's criteria for being happy? How can they be sure that the conditions of the job will actually contribute to making them happy? And so on. Looking at all of these questions, you can see that there's a lot in response even to one simple sentence that we could be thinking about. And you'll appreciate also that you can't think about all of those things consciously. Some of them may occur in consciousness. Sometimes it'll just be a sense that there are all these missing bits of information, things that we don't yet know about how the person is putting their version of reality together. However, it can be useful to think, what is the one thing that we could summarize out of that main sentence, and is there another way to represent it? It could be some way like this. we see that they perceive that certain aspects of the job will satisfy, that is, cause satisfaction for the criteria of being happy. In our mind, we still have this question: how specifically? That's the question that looms large in our mind. Now, before we look any further at the meta model, let's go ahead and look at the other side of this, the Milton model, utilising deleted information or deletions, generalizations, distortions, and presuppositions. And all of this is done with the intention of directionalizing the unconscious while occupying and distracting their conscious mind. In other words, what we're aiming to do here is facilitate the person's unconscious process in finding answers that are congruent with their beliefs and their values and their way of identifying themselves, in finding answers to the sorts of questions we might ask if we were meta-modelling them. But of course, there is a different quality to the way we ask the questions. So, your understanding of patterns and connections. When we say patterns and connections, think about the domains of intervention, the person's perception of context, the way they identify themselves in that context, the values that come to the fore with that particular form of identifying, their beliefs, their abilities and their capabilities, their actual behaviours and their interaction with the environment. Your understanding of these patterns and connections that you gain from your meta-model skills will guide your Milton modelling. But it won't do it in a formula-driven way. Let's have a look at some of the thinking that might occur if we map across from the kinds of things that we might wonder about or think about or even just simply sense when we hear somebody utter a sentence like, "When I get that job, I'll be happy." And how could we turn that around to start to facilitate their unconscious in thinking along certain ways? Suppose, for example, someone says this: "I want a job that I can be happy doing." We could ask, note I've said we could, we don't have to ask these specific questions, but we could ask these things. With respect to the presupposition that they'll get the job, we could say something along the lines: "As you recognise, deep inside, the knowledge and skills you can bring to this job, you can begin to imagine how you might see yourself engaging in behaviours that someone looking at you would recognise as signs of true ability." Remember, we don't know what the job is, but to help them think about how the job might fit with them, we could say something along the lines like this: "And I'm wondering how easily you can use your own growing awareness of your knowledge and skills, the strong and the ones you know you need to develop, to help you identify those particular types of jobs that will help you to learn, grow, evolve in a way that is true to who you really are. You know, deep inside. Who is that?" And then, of course, with respect to the cause-effect, we could say something like this, or ask something like this: "And as you imagine what happy means to you, you may begin to see yourself doing, saying, and feeling those changes that signal to you that as you be truly, congruently, you, it becomes even easier to know what you can learn, what you must learn, what you could forget, what you can refine when you find yourself in just the right kind of work that really is meaningful and valuable to you. Then you can see yourself in a whole different way." So with the meta model, we take those principles and we turn them around to use the deletions, distortions, and generalizations to guide the kinds of directionalization that we offer in the language we feed back to help that person begin to understand more deeply their model of the world and to facilitate quality change in it. And remember, if there's any formula at all in this, it's follow the principles. Just one thing to keep remember. Follow the principles. And so with these two perspectives, meta model and Milton model, we ask ourselves, what's the key to success with these two models? Well, it's that. Know the linguistic distinctions. In the meta model, be able to recognize them. In the Milton model, be able to recognize them. Be able to generate them in both models of thinking. Be able to question them. Be able to generate questions in Milton's style. Be able to detect patterns over both the short term and the long term. And also be able to generate patterns over the short term and the long term. Be able to ask meta-model questions in a Milton model way. And ultimately, you'll find you begin to be able to work in both modes simultaneously. In parts 2 and 3 of this series, we look at a number of examples of how we can use the meta model and the Milton model. This is the end of part 1.